Battle Spirits is Bandai's premier trading card game in Japan, with 12 anime seasons, various video games, constantly being in the top percentages of Japan's TCG sales, many collabs, and just recently passing its 15th anniversary as it came out in September 2008 in Japan. This is a series rich with history, personality, and so much more to dive into. And yet, that intro sentence to grab your attention does more to get across the pedigree of Battle Spirits as a franchise than the English release of Battle Spirits Saga ever did. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit there. Battle Spirits Saga was announced in August of 2022 as an attempt to translate over a decade's worth of cards into English for a second attempt at localizing Battle Spirits. Bandai had previously attempted this before in 2009, but seeing as I had to explain what Battle Spirits is to open this video, you probably have an idea of how that went. We won't go in depth into that attempt as this is about the most recent release, Battle Spirits Saga, but it will come up. Unfortunately, it looks like history has repeated itself. This isn't a simple case of one bad mistake tanking the game's chances either. There's a multitude of reasons, some preventable, and some out of their hands, so I'll be doing my best in this video to present those chronologically as they came up in the game's lifetime. Battle Spirits Saga was always going to be an uphill sell in the West against established IPs like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, and Pokemon, especially in the current card game climate where it's the hottest it's ever been since the late 90s, with many new games coming in and thriving. Card games have historically been very IP dependent, but it is possible for new original games to break through, like Flesh and Blood. Battle Spirits is a prestigious, well-known game in Asian countries though, so Bandai could easily tap into that to make this sound like a big game you shouldn't miss out on. A hidden gem we're finally getting. Works for PlayStation 1 re-releases on digital storefronts all the time. However, if you look at the packaging of booster boxes, booster packs, starter decks, nothing mentions this. If it does, like in some of the marketing, it's relegated to only one line, which isn't nearly enough to get across the big deal this is in places like Japan. This is all admittedly a small thing, but plays into the bigger issue of the marketing to hype up the game's release. Credit where credit is due. Bandai did put money into shoving this game in your face. YouTube pre-roll ads, site banners, influencer sponsorships, giveaways, there was a push to get the game noticed by people. They could have quietly rolled this out with bare minimum advertising on Twitter or other social media sites, but instead there was a serious ad campaign. The problem arises in how they went about handling this ad campaign. The YouTube ads are good and all, but Bandai leaned heavily into influencer-sponsored marketing, which isn't inherently bad, but everyone and their mother got some demo care package, and the choices for the higher profile sponsorships were odd. Bandai sponsors some tabletop channels and anime/gaming skit channels like ProZD, which actually work well as crossover into communities that may have interest in actually going out and buying something like Battle Spirits Saga. But then you have sponsorships like MatPat, the game theory guy, which are a little head-scratching. Yes, you want to get the news out to the biggest audience possible, and on the surface his channel is gaming nerd content, but he just does not have the type of audience that would care to click on something like this over a Five Nights at Freddy's theory. These are some of his lowest viewed content ever on his channels that host them, and these couldn't have been cheap sponsorships. There's 15 years worth of lore to tap into, and that would be fitting for MatPat's channel, but they only ever cracked jokes about it in this sponsored video, with the bulk of it being learning to play the game. Then there's the infamous example that kind of became a meme for a moment among card game communities. Avril Lavigne was sponsored to tweet out a message hyping up the English release, and it's just, why? This kind of sponsorship honestly may not be as expensive as people might first assume, because it's just a tweet, but it's still money spent that's not going to reach any new customers and instead just ends up being used as a joke. Avril's cool, don't get me wrong, but this gave the impression of getting whoever you can to claim a high-profile name advertise the game, and being behind on trends. If Battle Spirits Saga was some Y2K aesthetic throwback game, this would at least be fitting, but it couldn't be farther from that. So instead, the game is left with a "how do you do, fellow kids" moments of a plug, which a lot of the advertising after the initial wave feels like. None of the existing Battle Spirits anime were tossed up with at least subs on YouTube to try and garner some kind of casual audience either. To be fair, this would probably be expensive as now you have to hire a team to translate and get licenses with distribution platforms, etc., perhaps pushing it out of the budget they intended for this project. But in an environment where IP and that connection to it is so important to sales, every little edge helps. Once there were signs that things weren't going too hot, it could have helped to revitalize interest in the game as well. Future Card Buddy Fight, during its initial release in the West, had a similar marketing strategy, dubbing their anime and tossing the episodes up on YouTube for free. Sometimes entire episodes has a pre-roll ad. These would often play as ads before related videos on topics like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, and while it's dead now, Buddy Fight lasted for 6 years, and that's with a name as goofy as Buddy Fight. But for whatever reason, this was not done for Battle Spirits Saga. Before the game officially came out in stores, Bandai hosted super pre-release events with cold hard cash prize support. These were basically giant high-stakes sealed events. When a new set of a card game comes out, a lot of games will have fun casual events called sealed, where you get 5 to 6 sets of the new set for your entry fee, and you all battle each other using whatever deck you can put together from your booster pack pulls. For these, if your store was able to get stock early, you could use your cards, but for the majority of people there, this was a glorified sealed event, cracking boxes open on the spot. The first event was held in Las Vegas in March on the same weekend as the stop of the Taylor Swift Eras concert tour. This massively inflated hotel and flight prices. Since this event was only announced a couple of months ahead of time in January, this left a bad taste in a lot of players' mouths. This is something that is admittedly somewhat out of Bandai's hands, as these kind of events need to be booked with the venue months to a year in advance, but could still have been avoided with a different state pick entirely. The open registration pages tell us that at least around 1,000 people were registered for this event, but the total from reports of people that were there was that only around 300 and some people showed up, likely due to these expenses. While this issue isn't a problem of the game itself, it would make the troubles people experience at this event that much worse. Players at this event bought and traded as much as they could to build the decks expected to be meta in hopes of winning the $350,000 prize pool. One of the most important cards in the set, and likely in the whole game, was Absolute Ice Shield. This card is almost always a 4-of in any deck that runs it, and it's a rare. That doesn't sound too bad at first. It's not like it's a super, ultra, or secret rare. But because of Battlespirit Saga's ratios, a copy of a rare isn't always guaranteed in a box. You can open an entire booster box and not pull any Absolute Ice Shields. A rare! Which was the reality for a lot of players at this event. There were reports of people buying and trading, valuing this card at $50. The event kind of turned into pull Absolute Ice Shield or bust. Of the recorded top 32 decks, only 6 were not running this card. The rest ran it at 3 and 4. Such a generically good instant 4-of being a rare is arguably already a misstep in a lot of people's eyes. There's a theory that something that is necessary at max amount of copies and generic should be a common or uncommon at worst, so players can easily have access to it since it's needed for multiple decks. From there, you specialize the super rares or secret rares into boss monsters or archetype key cards, so if a player is not interested in paying that price, they can at least build another deck. Kodak has a great video going over this in detail, which you can watch for a better breakdown, but I digress. Needless to say, not everyone had the best experience after all was said and done, so the word of mouth wasn't too great. You'd often see complaints about the event when it was recounted, and while not the end-all be-all, likely did impact a small percentage of people's perception of the game leading up to launch. The pre-launch and launch events were for people to compete towards a $1 million prize pool expected to capture every competitive player's attention. This can be seen as a huge investment into the competitive aspect of Battlespirit Saga, but in the grand scheme of things, competitive players are a niche within a niche, and not enough to keep something as expensive as an ongoing mass-produced card game in business. Maybe if this was only a mobile app game, but it's not. At the local and online level, a lot of people felt Bandai wasn't doing enough to get casual players interested. Unlike Digimon and One Piece, Battlespirit Saga did not have a store championship system to compete right in your hometown for an entry spot into nationals. None of the $1 million prize pool was put into local store championship-like events or online webcam events. Prizing was famously considered lackluster for these webcam events and had extremely low turnouts because of it. Instead of some of the advertised $1 million prize pool, these webcam events would have some promos similar to Bandai's other games. But without an IP tied to the series that makes people want these cards, there were only so many interested buyers for them. So you're not guaranteed to get anything for the cards if you're not interested in holding onto them. Unlike, say, Digimon, it was also only one random card in a promo pack and a life counter instead of multiple promos. You also don't scale up into any more interesting prizing until top 8, unlike Digimon, where you could get unique arts starting as early as top 128 in the Ultimate Cups, which is realistically achievable for some casual players. All of Bandai's other games do this, so it was an odd deviation from the norm. The biggest issue at the local level to hurt the game though was stores being forced to pre-order product ahead of time without being sure of how popular the game was. Something not unique to Battlespirit Saga, to be fair. There are multiple reports you had to pre-order set 1 and 2 together ahead of time. This game was released after the surprising, roaring success of Digimon and One Piece card games, so in an effort to not miss getting in on the ground floor, some stores may have went ahead and pre-ordered. There was a lot of products seemingly printed to meet an expected demand for this game. Unfortunately, the demand didn't seem to be there, so a lot of this product sat on store shelves. So once it came time for stores to pre-order a set for the first time after seeing the actual market demand, you were hard-pressed to find stores still interested. The pre-launch event would continue to have lingering effects on the state of the game in addition to what was already recounted. While the Vegas events and similar events did not have the biggest turnout, a lot of product was bought and opened at these events. More than was really needed for some players, as they just had to keep opening them in search of the cards they needed to win that event. Booster box pull rates are a cruel mistress. This led to all the product the players in attendance could ever need for meta decks in the first set, as well as extras that would be great as free gifts to friends to get them into your new game. While not the only reason for low sales, the competitive scene for this game would only be so big out of the gate, and people did fly in for this event from around all the United States. Online, there were pretty generous giveaways for starter packs as well to help you learn the game. Just fill out a survey, and it seems like everyone that filled it out did eventually get a starter pack. The cards in these packs were tournament legal and came with everything you would need to get started with 2 of these packs. These were also given away like candy at conventions and other online events. Between all this, it's very likely a decent chunk of the player base may have already gotten what they needed and not opened more cards. But anyways, after this launch event, the game finally hit store shelves, and the average card shop goer would be able to get their hands on the game, which led to once people got these cards in their hands, people were pretty vocal about how they disliked the visual design of the cards. All over the place, you see people criticizing the reuse of ages-old arts, assets from mobile games like Zen and Zard, and even the entire border and card layout. A lot of the card is taken up by the effect box, leaving only so much room for the art itself, which has only become more and more important in modern-day card games. A common sentiment was that this makes Battlespirit Saga feel like some Magic the Gathering knockoff game from 2004, despite coming out in 2023. This makes it pretty hard to get new players' attention at a glance, and made the IP rely on trying to convince people to sit down and play it to learn about its genuinely fun and well-designed mechanics. Even people familiar with Battle Spirits thought the change was odd, as the Japanese card layout is really nice and eye-catching. Personally, I cannot make it through reading a Battle Spirits Saga card, and that's not just because I play Yu-Gi-Oh! And don't know how to read. The layout, the crowded text box, and the card frame is so unappealing my brain shuts down halfway through any of these. Battle Spirits Saga around September 2023 started doing bonus mini sets called the Lore set. The cards in the set for some reason had completely different borders and layouts more closely resembling the Japanese card layout. It seems like Bandai recognized the complaints about how ugly these cards are, but this change never extended to the main booster set cards, which make up the overwhelming majority of the cards you'll use in your deck. So the game was just stuck with this weird middle ground compromise. Sales started to decline a couple of weeks into set 1's release, and we infamously hit the meme of $30 booster boxes around August 2023. But perhaps once a new set comes out that requires players to update their deck, we'll see an upward swing in momentum. Set 2 releases and does much of nothing to the meta. The top decks from the first expansion are still dominating, and thus the players that have stuck around start to get bored. It's not like these cards did much to support old decks either. A lot of the old decks performed as usual with minimal to no upgrading, which isn't a promising look to your player base to keep buying the product as it comes out. And the best meta deck among those was Axe Spider. The boss monster Axe Spider himself is uninteractable because of his protection, and then you have very efficient draw power in cards like Netherworld Depths, so it was a very uninteractive deck to play against, which isn't the most fun traditionally in card games. Worse still is that Axe Spider is a promo. Now, he wasn't terribly expensive for a promo, especially not now, but it was a tournament pack card, which means you have to physically go to these events to go get it. If you don't have any stores hosting events in your area, or you're not willing to travel to the grand opens or regionals that they hosted, you would have trouble finding this card, which is a pain for a lot of new players to get into when it's the best deck in the format. Bandai has a history of making meta-relevant cards promo cards, which means special promotion cards given out at events or with specific product. Players familiar with card games immediately saw red flags to this and were hesitant to get into Battle Spirit Saga, and players new to card games but interested in Battle Spirits unfortunately would be priced out, or at the very least too much effort to get into it to try to track down copies. All of this within the very first set of the game. It's just not a promising look for a lot of players to invest into, especially once Set 2 came out and didn't do anything to change the meta. There was little to no reason to buy Set 2 at all. There were some decks that did decent like green since it's a whole new color introduced, but it was more work when you could just not spend any money and keep using your old deck unchanged from Set 1. Set 2 also oddly changed the pull rates in booster boxes, making them worse. When you bought a box of Set 1, you were guaranteed 6 super rares and 1 alternate art. Super rares in most games are usually the second to highest rarity and where a lot of the top end power of a deck comes from. Alternate arts are usually naturally very hard to pull because of how many a set may have with only one shot at it, and thus valuable. In set 2, the ratios were changed to now have a chance to miss getting an alternate art entirely for a 7th super rare instead. This brings the value of super rares overall down with more in circulation, while just making a box even less worth buying because now you have a chance to not even get one of the money cards that can maybe make your money back. Set 2 also introduced Gundam alternate art box toppers as a way to generate hype and interest in the new set. This sounds great on paper, but the implementation unfortunately wasn't the best. In Japan, Battle Spirits has become known for having many crossover cards. These are full sets of unique cards with flavor to their franchises. In the English release of Set 2, these were just alt-arts for already existing cards in the set. This may seem like a small thing for most people, but it's something that makes it feel a lot less special to the big fans. Plus, it just ends up feeling like a tease when you see how the Gundam crossover was handled in Japan by comparison. You get 6 or so cards in English that are Gundam themed versus an entire set in Japan. It doesn't make the English release seem promising going forward. But the worst of Set 2 was, the cases they came in could allegedly be seeded. This means there was a pattern you could follow to make sure you pull out the boxes that have the 7 super rares instead of alt-arts and sell those without opening them. So someone could theoretically open the expensive boxes with alt-arts at no risk and sell the duds according to reports online. This made product online and other secondhand sources incredibly untrustworthy, which led to Set 2 also tanking out at $30 prices. Prices would keep crashing down to a record low of $15 for a box of Set 1 by the end of 2023 when it released in March of the same year. The lore set mentioned earlier launched in September 2023 with an MSRP of $30, and by the very next month was going for less than half of that at online retailers. At this point, things really did look grim for Battle Spirit Saga. To Bandai's credit at least, they did try to course correct after the first 2 sets underperformed, listening to fan surveys, improving ratios, and introducing an entire collab set with Evangelion, not just alternate art box toppers. But with how shops got financially burned on the first 2 sets, the damage had been done. More and more shops backed out on supplying the game. Bandai social media teams became slower and slower to update the player base on new releases, and by October of 2024, posts from the official Twitter warning that event turnouts were getting so low they would have to start canceling events became more and more common. Standard things like FAQs for the new sets started being uploaded very late. The writing was so on the wall, it would have looked corny even in Silent Hill. Set 6 in December 2024 is officially the last set of the English Battle Spirit Saga card game. On February 7th, 2023, Bandai officially put out a statement that the English Battle Spirit Saga card game was coming to an end on March 2025. Just 1 month short of exactly 2 years since it launched. Another victim to the 2-year curse of card games. What's most sad about all this is that the game is genuinely fun and well designed. Ask anyone that has even made a joke or two at the expense of the game, and even they'll admit, no, yeah, it's great, I wish it was handled better. Just because a game is dead doesn't mean you can't play it though. As long as there's 2 people playing, there's a scene. This logic works better for fighting games, which is where I got it from, but I think card gamers can still learn to apply it. After a recent cancellation, the cards will be cheap and you can make decks for your friends. My heart goes out to those that love this game. It sucks to have to see it fail twice. The worst part is that a lot of this could have been avoidable. Too late to course correct, playing it too safe with the collab cards in Set 2, questionable use of marketing budget, overspending on in-person event locations when it's a new game, putting so much money into the competitive aspect when competitive players are a niche at best, and the casual collector is what keeps games afloat. If nothing else, hopefully lessons can be taken from this and be applied to Bandai's multitude of other card games we're running right now. Thanks for watching. I hope this was informative for you guys, and if nothing else, entertaining. If you enjoyed it, please give a like and a comment below, and I will try to get back to uploading regularly eventually, but for now this will have to do. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, until next time, I hope to see you again, and until then, remember to stay hungry until you get a taste of victory. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much. I just wanted to come back and add last minute because I totally forgot to include it in the beginning of the video, but those cringy influencer collab advertisements. One of them was for Set 3, one of them was with the Game Grumps in Big 2024. They were a promo pack that you get for buying a booster box, and if you go to the Game Grumps subreddit, the only comments on the video, of the announcements are just people being confused as heck. How do you even buy this product? And it's just a quick short on their channel. There was no clear effort put into these collabs, and it's just kind of throwing the darts at influencers that are vaguely related to card games, because at least Aaron Hansen does have his own channel now where he does pack openings for cards, and I guess nerd adjacent video game content, so it's not the worst choice in the world, but it's also such a dated choice in 2024, and it's just an example of the kind of collabs they were doing and spending their money for their advertising budget. It was just really uphill battle for this game with these kind of choices.